Time for Draft Class. Joining me today from Game Theory Podcast, Sam Vecenie. I saw Cam Boozer with Duke face Kansas at Madison Square Garden on Tuesday night in New York City. I was hoping, Sam, we'd get to see Darren Peterson against Cam Boozer, but unfortunately Peterson out with a hamstring issue. But Cam Boozer did play in that game. And, you know, if you didn't watch the game, 18 points, 11 boards, 5 assists. Some inefficiency again from him. 7 of 17 has become a topic among the draft community. How so far this season, he's only 11 of 25 at the rim in the half court, only 2 dunks. I talked a little bit about this with James Barlow last week as well, and he brought that up early in the year, and it's continued to be a thing. Are you concerned about this at all, or do you just view this as a early season blip for college freshmen adjusting to another level of play?
So, yeah, I kind of have a theory on this, and this show is going up on Thursday. I've written this for Thursday at The Athletic. And my working theory on this is that Cam Boozer was basically the size that he is now when he was in like 9th, 10th grade, right? Like he was maybe not quite as strong and maybe not quite as like 240 to 250 pounds, but like big dude. And I think that because of that, he never has really faced much resistance at the rim in high school and in AAU settings. He was always just so coordinated and had so much touch and was clearly so much stronger than everybody else that he was just able to get where he wanted at the basket and was able to finish through guys, and it wasn't really an issue. So instead of having to work on his gathers and his ability to separate going toward the rim, I think that what he ended up deciding to work on was the perimeter game, the ability to shoot, continuing to understand where his passing reads are, the ball handling ability that we love. I'm not sitting here saying this was a bad thing or a wrong decision. I just think it was a decision that was made at the end of the day that was, hey, I'm going to improve and become a perimeter player that can be inside and outside when necessary. Because of that, I wonder if some of the footwork and the gathers and things like that we see from him, where it's just all power going to the basket. Like we haven't really seen him separate from anybody on his drives yet. Like AJ has some interesting, more polished footwork to be able on his drives with Euro steps, with different little pivots around the basket to be able to get a little bit of separation, a little bit of space to extend and finish at the rim. I feel like Cam is just often trying to blow through guys and power through guys, and it's creating situations where the shots at the rim are very difficult. So that's kind of my theory. I mean, what do you think of that theory is what I would ask you.
I think it makes perfect sense. It does, because he's always been this size. Yeah, I mean, like you said, he's always been big. He's probably obviously stronger now than he was when he was a freshman, sophomore, but he has improved in those other areas. And maybe this is an area that, to your point, he didn't dedicate that time to and didn't get that in-game experience in order for these things to naturally develop, considering he was just always so much bigger. It's kind of like how sometimes, with guards who are 6'4", 6'5", they were able to just use power at a certain level, and their athleticism so far exceeded other players, it becomes harder to then adapt to the NBA when they're facing a 6'8" wing with a 7'1" wingspan defending them on the perimeter in the NBA. What they had done at a lower level suddenly becomes a lot harder to do. And so I think with Boozer, there are also some instances where it's like, why didn't he just dunk that? Like, I think he has that in him, where like he's just not going up for the dunk. And why is that a mindset thing? Is that like the DeAndre Ayton, I don't like the dunk type of thing? I don't know what that is, but I do think considering I don't either. Yeah. I don't either for what it's worth. But I do think with Boozer, considering the ways in which he's improved other categories of his game, you at least have to feel some level of confidence, right, Sam? That he will figure this out by the end of the season, and definitely at some point into the future in the NBA. I would expect that to be figured out. I don't think he's always going to be a bad at-rim finisher. I'd be blown away, so shocked if that were the case.
That's exactly how I feel about it. Like, I think it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when. And, he's not, you talk to anybody around the league, anybody that's done the intel into Cam Boozer, they'll tell you like he's absolutely a worker. You have no worries about whether or not he's going to get better or continue to improve his game. It's just that I think that he needs to focus on this part of his game, and maybe it does continue throughout the year. Maybe he is unable to fix this because they're in the middle of a season and he's also in school and there are other things going on for him, right? Maybe he does need a summer to be able to work through this, but I think he will work through it. I'm not that concerned about it long term. And the other piece of it with Boozer is that, you look at all the statistical production and everything, the way he impacts the game across multiple pieces of the box score. The process for him is completely sound. Like you look at the way that Kansas felt like it had to dedicate just mountains of pressure to him. Like there was an inbounds pass last night where, whoever it was on the wing guarding, I forget who it was. It might have been like Isaiah Evans or something. Completely blew like a switch where Trey White called out a switch, but the end result was like literally three guys went to Cam Boozer in the lane, and it led to a wide open three because everyone's just so worried about this guy getting the ball at the end of the day. And then it felt like they were doubling him every time he touched the ball inside of 12 to 15 feet or so because they were so worried about the damage that he could do on the interior, even though he has struggled as an interior finisher this year. So I love the process for Boozer, the way that he reads the court when he does get doubled, the way that he makes quick decisions. He plays fast. He has a very quick brain in the way that, some of the really high level players do. Like the name that has always stuck out with me with him, I've always kind of felt like, and people might take this as a slight, and I don't mean it this way, he plays a lot like Kevin Love did when Kevin Love was at UCLA and was like, a little bit heavier than what Kevin Love is now, right? Kevin Love is probably going to be a Hall of Famer. So, like, when I say that, I don't say that lightly. It's just that I think that that's always the name that has stuck out most with me with Boozer, except I think Boozer is even further ahead in terms of his perimeter game and his shooting ability and his ball handling ability than what Kevin was when Kevin was at UCLA and through his first couple of years in the NBA, which I think gives Cam even greater upside than a guy that I think probably ends up in the Hall of Fame. So I don't say that lightly, but I think that people might hear the name Kevin Love and they go, oh, that'd be a disappointment if he ends up as Kevin Love. I don't think it would be. And I think he has like a little bit more juice than that, even just because of the how developed his game is to this point as an 18-year-old already.
I mean, it is funny having those conversations because it's Kevin Love you hear a lot. It's Al Horford as well. Both those guys are going to be Hall of Famers. And yet, so sometimes you say those names and it feels like, that's it? That's all? That's all he's going to be? And I think with Boozer, Sam, the dude's going to be a winning player. I mean, as you said earlier, the process of how he's approaching this game early on, he looks more like an upperclassman with the process of everything. And with Boozer, I have no doubts about his ability to be a good player in the NBA. I do think there is a little bit of that. I'm sure you're hearing this too. Is Caleb Wilson actually better? Like, are you hearing that too from some people out there in the NBA already?
Started to get it last night more than anything because Caleb played well against
transition and doing more off the dribble and all that. It's enticing what Caleb Wilson's doing.
Yeah, and we have a common opponent, obviously, now with Kansas. So, we saw what Caleb did to Kansas. We saw what Cam did with Kansas. I don't know. I want to see more of them before I make some sort of declaration. My immediate reaction is I would rather have Cam, but that's almost more of a stylistic assessment on my part in terms of what I prefer from players. I really like guys that process the game at a super high level. I like the skill level of really being able to shoot the basketball. And I think that Cam, this is the part where I think Cam gets underrated. I actually think he's a really underrated defender. He's a really smart team defender. He rotates across the play constantly. His communication on the back end of that Duke defense is absolutely outstanding. We saw that at Hoop Summit as well in practices. Like, he was very clearly the loudest player on the USA team in terms of communicating, making sure that the guys in front of him had the information that they needed. So, look, I'm still pretty firmly on the Boozer side, but undeniably, you aren't wrong that those messages did come through last night to me. And I will be interested to see how this conversation kind of matures throughout the year as we get more information on the two of them.
Yeah, I think with Caleb Wilson, he had the turnaround jumpers early in the year and the full court handle. Granted, it's against Navy, but the full court, the kind of Euro and it's like Giannis like, where it's like, oh wow, this is crazy. He has this in him, and he's doing more of it. The high low passing to Vsar. He's not a Boozer level facilitator, to your point, but he's solid. And I just look forward to seeing how this develops, because I do think of those guys behind the consensus top three, Caleb Wilson is the one so far who's most crashing that party, and certainly has a chance to surpass Boozer. And again, like it's also going to depend on who wins the lottery in May. Like it's going to depend on what teams are valuing and what they're looking for with what order these guys might end up going. But Caleb Wilson, super, super impressive start to this season for sure. On Saturday, I was at TD Garden in Boston for the BYU UConn game. And that was such a strange AJ Dybantsa game, Sam. In the first half, it was all the reasons you're concerned about AJ Dybantsa. And then in the second half, it's all the reasons why you love AJ Dybantsa. He had 4 points on 1 of 6 field goals, had a hard time creating space off the dribble, turning the corner in the first half. And then in the second half, 21 points on 7 of 8, 2 of 2 from 3, looked like a star scorer, incredible half. What's your assessment of that AJ game we saw against UConn?
Yeah, so two things happen, really three things, I guess we could say. So, first and foremost, I think the team that I like most watching scouts play against, or no, I'm sorry, the team I most like watching players play against is Connecticut, because I know for a fact that Connecticut team is incredible from a pregame scout perspective. They're going to make your life miserable. They're going to try and take away what you do well. To a greater extent, I think, than anybody else in the country. Number two, I thought that what happened in the first half was that AJ didn't really figure out where the help was coming from. Connecticut was consistently helping off of Rob Wright in that game with Silas DeMary, and DeMary would come in and kind of dig on the handle. They had multiple other guys as well that would get helped off of on Dybantsa's drives. And I think AJ didn't really figure that out. He had 3 pretty rough turnovers in the first half as well. And it felt like a worst case scenario of what some of the concerns are for what AJ's problems could be in the NBA, because he does have a fairly loose handle still on the perimeter. If you blitz the ball against him, he can really have to retreat and get loose with the ball. And on top of it, he is still a questionable shooter on some level. I think he's really comfortable getting into that 16 feet and in range, but from the perimeter, teams are still feeling like they can kind of let him shoot at the end of the day. But what I think ended up happening in the second half was twofold. First, I think BYU got a lot more intentional about the way that they spaced around AJ. They made sure that their shooters were always next to him. They always tried to get him into an empty side action if they could. And then they made sure that the closest guy to him in an empty was a shooter, be it the Tyler Maroose kid who was at Idaho last year, or be it Richie Saunders or Dawson Baker. One of the shooters was always on that same side of AJ in order to facilitate difficulty doubling if you were Connecticut. But more than that, I think AJ also figured out where the help was coming from as well in moments where BYU was not able to be as intentional, because basketball is such a fluid game, right? So I think that was the part of it that was most impressive to me was AJ. I think his problem solving on the fly in games has gotten a little bit underrated this year. You watch him against Villanova. He had a terrific close to that game as well. He was great closing against Connecticut, obviously, as you mentioned, with the 21 points in the second half. I think he's done a really, really good job of problem solving defenses throughout the course of the game and figuring out exactly where the help is coming from and where teams have to, or where teams are sending help from, and adjusting off of that and making plays based off of that.
I think that's a perfect assessment there, Sam. And I felt like, in the arena at that game, I'm like, too bad. We're going to see the worst of AJ in his homecoming in Massachusetts, playing, in the Celtics arena, got the logo at center court, grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts. And, then he gave BYU a chance in that second half and ended up being kind of a moment for him. And on social, I posted the highlights and I said, AJ Dybantsa looks like Tracy McGrady. I know you didn't like that. I'm curious, do you have a comparison for AJ Dybantsa?
Oh, my complaint wasn't about you saying he looks like Tracy. I don't think he really looks like Tracy, but that wasn't my complaint. My complaint was I wasn't even talking about you when I said that. I was talking about what the person said about like draft coverage in general. Where they were talking about like Klosterman said something on Simmons' show about just draft coverage being so much about where you have a guy and you get locked in on the guy as opposed to just doing the work and like evaluating these kids and everything. That I think is more what frustrates me a lot of the time in regard to draft coverage, because I'm just about like the scouting and doing the work. I don't mind thinking he looks like AJ. The piece of it that's different for me is that he's just a lot more powerful at that age than AJ was, or than Tracy was. Like Tracy was quite skinny and wasn't really able to power through guys in the way that AJ does. Obviously very explosive. Nobody would deny that. But I think that AJ is even a little bit further ahead of where Tracy was at that age, at least, in regard to being able to just power through guys at the rim. To be honest with you, like I don't have a great name for him right now. That's why I'm like, when you say, you didn't
hard
like
to find
that, it doesn't really bother me that you said that.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree, but
for what it's worth, I think for me, it's like T-Mac was so comfortable with the left. Like he was basically ambidextrous.
Yeah.
And like AJ goes left a lot. And there's the playmaking willingness with size. There's the fluidity and comfort with the back to the basket. And it's like, okay, that's, there's shades of T-Mac. He's not, it's not like a perfect one-to-one. I think the people who responded saying
totally.
like RJ Barrett, that's too extreme. I think AJ's far more fluid, but also I get what you're saying, RJ Barrett at a younger level, but I don't think there is a perfect comp for AJ. He's a funky prospect. There's no perfect one.
I agree with you. He's way better than RJ. The difference between him and RJ is I think he is better at playing with like flexibility and bend and being able to get lower than his opponent.
That
and
spin
then like
move,
is just
reach
way
layup
more,
AJ had, like that's a good one.
He's way bigger and he's way more explosive than what RJ was. Again, I don't have a great name for AJ. Like I might have to go back into history and see if there's somebody that like really tracks for AJ. I don't have it right now. He's kind of his own guy, and like I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me because the archetype of player is that he's just an advantage creator. He's a guy that if you get him open space, and I think what's so impressive about AJ and why you can see this really working in the NBA at an incredibly high level is the way that the floor is spaced in the NBA, because the shooting around him will be so much better and you have to guard him, or you have to guard his teammates so much more consistently even than you do his BYU teammates. It's going to open up even greater driving lanes for him as long as he finds the right situation. So that's what's most impressive to me. But yeah, look, like I'm actually not going to hate on the Tracy McGrady comp. Like I don't know that I agree with it, but I don't have one, so I can't make fun of it if I don't have one. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's hard to find one for him. It's more like a shades of when you assess AJ Dybantsa. Let's move on to our weekly movers. Who are you moving up, Sam, after the first 2 weeks of the college basketball season?
Yeah, so Kingston Flemings at Houston is definitely the name that I'm just going to be honest. Like I hadn't seen a lot of him coming into the year. You and I both have incredibly busy jobs where we're trying to keep track of everybody as much as possible. And I'm watching as much high school stuff as I can. I'd seen maybe like 1 or 2 games of Flemings in high school, like coming into his year at Houston, and just didn't feel great about putting him on a mock draft. I'd heard from a couple of scouts that had been down to Houston, like, hey, he looks like he's going to be a guy this year. It looks like he could be really, really good. But I would say that he is impressed even beyond what I expected. The explosiveness is obviously very real. That popped off the film in high school for sure. But it's the polish and the craft. I think that we see the ability to just stop on a dime, get to a mid-range jumper like it's absolutely nothing. Like there's a possession in that Auburn game where he has Elijah Freeman, who's like 6'7", 6'8". Interesting NBA prospect in his own right because he's a pretty good defender, has potential to shoot it at some point, athletic, and he just absolutely blows by Elijah Freeman. Freeman has to like chase and slide all the way back to be able to even have a chance to get back in front of him in recovery. And Fleming said stop on a dime at the elbow, and Freeman goes like 6 feet to his right, like trying to slow down, and Fleming just gets a wide open jumper at the elbow. I mean, like that stuff is super impressive. I don't know that we've seen like crazy vision from Flemings yet. I really like the way that he has, shared running the offense with Milos Uzan there. I think that Uzan does a lot of the organizational work where you'll see him pointing and getting the team into sets. And then they let Flemings be the guy who's creating and kind of getting advantages and getting paint touches because he's so fast, right? I really like the way that offense is operating. And look, Kelvin Sampson puts a lot on your shoulders. And if you can't do it early on, he won't play you, is the reality. Like he will not like go through it. He will let you learn in practice and will let you figure it out. So the fact that this guy is the point guard at Houston, along with Uzan, partially running the show, that in and of itself says something that Kelvin Sampson trusts him to be a high level player. So I have been very impressed with Flemings. He has to get way better on defense. The defense was a real issue in the Auburn game, I thought. He and Chris Senak had some really bad miscommunications in that game, but I really have been impressed with Flemings. And I will tell you, the scouting community has also been very impressed with Kingston Flemings.
I mean, so far this season, averaging 17 points per game, 5 assists, 3.5 boards, 6'4", shooting 40% from three. In that game against Auburn, it was also, juxtaposed against Ahad Pettiford, who was in the draft conversation last year, ends up going back to school. Pettiford off to a very slow start in his sophomore year for Auburn. Flemings looked like the better prospects in that game. At least you mentioned in passing there, Sinak for Houston, a potential lottery pick if he stays in the draft. I'd say Houston, Tennessee, going to be the game to watch this week. If people are picking one game to watch, that's going to be the game, right, Sam?
Oh, 100%. Like that is by far the most interesting game of the week, if only because we get Nate Ament against that really difficult Houston defensive front line, where to me, JoJo Tugler was the best defender in college basketball last season, point blank. His ability to cover ground, his strength, his ability to kill possessions on the defensive glass.
Can you describe
I love that
JoJo for people who haven't watched Houston? If they missed March Madness last year.
He's listed at like 6'8" or 6'9". He might be 6'7". I don't know. He has like a 7'5", 7'6" wingspan, and this dude covers ground better than any big, quote unquote, in all of college basketball. I remember last year there was possession where he like contested and drove Mark Sears like all the way out of bounds on a switch possession and like kind of stumbled behind the basket. And then Sears had kicked it out and went like swing to the opposite wing from where Tugler was. And Tugler made a rotation that had to be, I swear to God, 35 feet in between the time that Alabama had like swung the ball twice in order to X out and get to the opposite wing to close out on the shooter and block a shot. I was like, this is the craziest thing I think I've seen somebody do on a basketball court defensively in a long time. He's a great rim protector. He is awesome rotationally within that scheme. He cannot offense right now. Let's just like baseline it. He can't offense really, but defensively, like we've seen guys like Isaiah Stewart work. Like the level to which Isaiah Stewart at Washington was ahead of where JoJo is on offense is drastic. But you look at the role Isaiah Stewart is playing right now for the Detroit Pistons, and I think that's kind of what the vision would be for JoJo Tugler.
Yeah, to Tugler so far. To your point, though, we're gonna have to see a lottery pick go against a defense with a bunch of NBA caliber guys. Uzan, very good player as well for Houston.
And to the other point of that too, like don't sleep on Tennessee either. Like Rick Barnes, his defenses are always incredibly organized. Felix Okpara is a very good interior rim protector that will make life difficult for Houston when trying to score at the rim. So Kingston Flemings will have to show on some level that he's able to shoot the ball. Uzan, also a really interesting prospect that I think could go late first, early second, somewhere in that range. I found it really interesting in the Houston Auburn game too that they closed with Isaiah Hartwell, and he played a lot of late minutes in that game too, which said to me that even though he came into the season recovering from an injury, Kelvin Sampson was pretty clear about that in all of the press conferences, that they're starting to gain like a real comfort level with his two-way play as well as another five-star prospect at Houston that has some one-and-done potential. So really, really excited about the Houston-Tennessee game for, myriad reasons.
What do you want to see from Nate Ament in this game against Houston?
Yeah, I would like to see like real toughness driving to the rim. He was never a particularly good rim finisher in high school, in my opinion. Uh, how does he adjust to the physicality that Houston will present him? I think will be a really interesting conversation. How does he create in half court settings? That is probably for a guy that was pretty consistently ranked in the top 5 in the preseason of most people's boards, on the NBA side, in public situations, everything like that. My concern has always been, how does he create shots? Like, is he more of just a knockdown shooter who attacks closeouts and ends up being like, kind of like what Andrew Wiggins has become in the NBA? Maybe, a better or worse version of that, depending on your opinion of Ament. I would guess probably worse because he's not as good of an athlete as what Wiggins was entering the NBA. But, longer body, 6'8", 6'9". Well, I think Ament's listed at like 6'10" or 6'11 even. So probably like 6'9", 6'9.5 without shoes. Really interesting player. I would just like to see where the handle is, where the half court creation ability is. I think he's unselfish. I think he's a good passer. I think he can shoot the ball. I like his defensive rotational ability. Can he create half court shots? Because ultimately that will be the key to him going in the top, whatever you want to call it, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Going to be an interesting game, Sam. Appreciate you joining me today, man. This is a lot of fun. Please let people know where they can find all your stuff.
Yeah, go to The Athletic first and foremost. Really enjoy the work I do there, and appreciate everybody over there. Go to the Game Theory podcast, Game Theory with Sam Vecenie, over on YouTube, over on whatever podcasting platform you use. We appreciate everybody that comes through. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Sam. Have a good day, man.
Yeah, you too.